Welcome back to my channel, everybody. Today we're going to work on the 1977 Jeep CJ7, better known as Bust Rucket. We're going to jump right into this project today. We're going to work on the electrical system, fuel system, and see if we can't get this thing to fire up and run. Maybe even go for a test drive. It's sat for 9 or 10 years in a garage, hadn't moved, so we'll see what we get into. Alright, so this thing sat for 9 years or so. I didn't want to trust the fuel in the tank, so I hooked it up to a jerry can. Pretty standard. Just right into the fuel pump on the inlet side. Took the battery out of the other CJ. It seems to work pretty good. Pulled the air breather off. I haven't even tried to kick this thing off yet. This will be the absolute first try. So, not sure what's going to happen. Got some wires hanging down here. Big holes in the floor. This thing's in pretty rough shape. Window frame's just toast, but the brand new one in the box. So I'm not going to pour any fuel in the carburetor because this thing hasn't moved and I don't know how long nothing's been done with it. So I'll crank her over a few times. Well, I think we all know what that means. Long story short, I've got my booster cables hooked up to my Liberty with my good battery. I'll give it a shot here. Clickety click. So that tests good. Wow. Reality is, it doesn't test good until it's actually in the Jeep. The Jeep's running, but it at least gives us the indication that there's something wrong with our starting system in the Jeep or the battery itself that we're using in the Jeep. Both are fired. Alright, made a little bit of headway here. Been playing around with this and I'm a little surprised, but I did kind of suspect it to a point. I was questioning the ground wires that were here. They're like some sort of aircraft cable or I'm not even sure, but because of the gauge of them, I was concerned that they weren't giving it a good enough ground. He's got them run around here. He's done a nice job. They're cut nicely to length. They're all heat shrinked on the ends. They're bolted in well. They've got good fasteners. But every time I hit the key on this starter, they seem to let off a touch of smoke. They get low warm to the touch, and it will not fire with my 200 amp charger on here or with my Jeep boosting it. And these cables I've got on here have never failed me. These things have always started something. Didn't matter how dead the battery was. It's always worked. It doesn't even click. The solenoid will make noise. The starter doesn't do anything. Put power directly to the starter. Doesn't work in the Jeep, but out on the ground it does. Now I know putting a load on it's a different thing, you know, versus trying to kick it off in the driveway with no load on it. But I should at least hear that Bindex try to engage or kick out or something. And it's trying, but it's just not doing it. So it leads me to the ground. So what I'm gonna do, and I'm 99% sure I'm right, is I've taken a ground cable, a booster cable, connected it to the bolt on the starter. I'm gonna take my jumper cable off that was attached to my Liberty. I'm gonna leave the negative on here, and I'm gonna hit this key. And I'm about 100% positive this is my issue. I think these ground cables are the problem, and I think a new set of ground cables are in my future today. So let's hit this and see if it lights off. Oh, I friggin' knew it. Definitely got an exhaust leak. I don't see any oil. That's a good sign. Definitely gonna need a header gasket. A stinky old girl, that's for sure. Let's see if we can get up in here. Ugh. Yeah, I was gonna choke and puke. Ah. She's gonna need some love. Aha. Nope, started on its own with no fuel prime other than the pedal. To be continued. So the Jeep stalling out there not wanting to start wasn't the Jeep's fault. It was the dummy who set up the jerry can. When I moved it, I didn't realize that the siphon tube I have going inside moved, and it actually popped up and out of the water, so, or out of the fuel. The water. I don't know why she won't start. She's got plenty of water in her. Anyway, yeah, gas. So the siphon tube was up out of the gas. Probably take a minute to prime it back up. Probably gonna take just long enough to kill the battery right before it fires. Whew. Or I'm lucky today and it runs. Neighbor's not home. Smoke them if you got them. It hums like a kitten. A little smoky, but it's running nice. It's letting that oil burn off. I can't even believe that revs up. I thought for sure I was going to be rebuilding that carburetor. Not sure exactly where the exhaust leak is yet. I'm assuming it's just the manifold gasket, or maybe there's a crack underneath. It's actually gotten quieter now that it's warmed up. So I wanted to see what happens when I pull the ground off of here, see if it affects the charging. I'm willing to bet it will. If you listen to that whine, you can hear the alternator. And that alternator whine just went away. The voltage dropped slightly. Wine's back on. Voltage didn't really increase as much as I thought. I thought it was going to drop more drastically and increase more drastically than it did. She's at 14. You can definitely tell. There we go. It's probably just taking a minute for the alternator to bring the voltage back up in the battery. There's definitely a grounding issue on this Jeep. So I'll address that today. So I've been running this 77 Jeep CJ just off this little jerry can. Not the best thing in the world, but it's also not bad. So it's just basically tied in around here, down, looped, and in there. I didn't want to cut the hose because I use it for lots of stuff, so that's why it's looped. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the stock line, I'm going to splice it down here, I'm going to stick that inline filter in there, and I'm going to disconnect my temporary line, reconnect the original line, and crank it a few times just by the solenoid so I can keep an eye on it. I want to see what comes out of the tank because I was banging on it and the tank sounds completely empty. So if it is, I'm going to put some gas in, slosh it around a bit, and see how nasty it is when it comes up through here. Maybe I get lucky and I can get away with just running it. We'll see. There's the Karud I was expecting to pop up in the filter. Beautiful. Not as bad as I thought, actually. See it on that side better. But that's what that filter's for, it's to catch that garbage. I'm just jumping the solenoid here. Okay, I can keep an eye on things. And here we go. So, it's running. Now, I primed the line up a little bit. I stuck a funnel down in that fuel line, poured some fresh gas down in there so I wasn't sitting here cranking for an hour. So I'm just making sure that that's not what's coming up and out of there. That black, I think, is actually from the deteriorating hose. The black rubber line is shot. So I'm just keeping an eye on it. If it starts getting really murky, really nasty, I'm going to shut it down, I'll drop the tank and I'll clean it out. For right now, it's promising. So what I'll do now is I'll pick up another couple of filters. I'll put fresh line on there. I'll check the lines back at the tank, make sure they're safe. And go for a drive. And then I'll check the filters after. I'll use clear ones again. And if they're good, great, I'll leave them there. If not, I'll buy a higher end filter, I'll put it on and I'll leave that one on permanently.